Hello, my name is Olu Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and of course, today is March the 6th, 2026. It's about a week since the US decapitation of the Iranian leadership, which has instigated, a war, at least a military intervention, and there's been a bombing campaign by joint U.S. and Israeli forces in Iran. And Iran has, of course, been retaliating through its drone and missile strikes and threats to the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a very strategic area as it's a passage, it's a shipping passage that allows. Uh, One of the things it does is it allows oil from GCC countries. That's the Gulf Cooperation Council, which includes Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, which controls a very significant portion of the world's oil supply, probably about 20%. Uh, and so, you know, it, the ongoing war has threatened the shipping and the passage of oil, from that Strait of Hormuz. Interestingly, that Strait of Hormuz, oil from that region, right, from the Strait of Hormuz, accounts for about 50% of China's oil supply. Um, Prior to America's intervention in Iran, uh, America had, of course, um, intervened in Venezuela, right, by kidnapping its the president Nicolas Maduro on apparent drug trafficking offenses charges, which is facing currently facing trial for he and his wife in New York. America also went on to, impose a naval blockade and commandeer the oil of Venezuela. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Importantly, its largest importer of oil was China, right? And so between Venezuela uh, and Iran, their oil capacity. By the way, Iran has uh, the third largest oil proven reserves in the world. So those two nations had been facing sanctions from the United States, but they were major suppliers of China's oil imports. So those between those two nations, they provide roughly 30%, over 30% of China's oil supply. With American military intervention right now, there's a disruption to China's oil supply. So about 30% of China's oil supply has been threatened due to America's ongoing military intervention, which started this year, on January the 3rd, 2026, when America, of course, first, uh, you know, executed a special ops operation, kidnapping the president and, commandeering its resources. Now, these threats to China's oil, right? It can, we don't know what sort of blowback it will have, how China is going to respond. Of course, America has nuclear weapons, so does China. So hopefully, this doesn't instigate some kind of, a war between China and America, because obviously there's some kind of economic war going on between them. Interestingly, America has $38 trillion in debt, and China has between 2 to 7% of that uh, $38 trillion debt. America has $38 trillion in national debt, and China has between 2 to 7 trillion of that national debt. In treasury bills, actually, China has around between $860 billion to $1 trillion of U.S. treasury bills. So uh, the U.S. owes China about $1 trillion. That is, and there are various estimates. But something that I've been wondering is by the way America has impeded China's supply of oil. I'm wondering if so now that about 30% to 50% of China's oil supply is being cut off, right, through America's military exercise, its military intervention in Venezuela and and Iran. I'm wondering if America is trying to sort of place China under duress so they can wipe out America's debts to China. That's one, or seek alternative sources of oil from America directly. America is a major oil producer as well, but America also buys a lot of oil. China is now currently the largest buyer of oil. It's between China and America because China is actually the biggest manufacturer in the world right now. It has the largest GDP in the world. Its GDP actually has now surpassed um, America's GDP, according to the CIA World Fact Book, as of February 2026, when the CIA World Fact Book, it's unclassified. It was an open source database that the CIA provided on its website, and it's now defunct. But China had become the largest um, economy, had the largest gross domestic production. So, but of course, and you need oil. You need oil for your industries to power your manufacturing, your industries, and your economy, and yeah, that's a vital strategic resource. So, um, I wanted to, take us back in history. This has happened before and we see patterns. Now, in the past, when America disrupted the oil supply of Japan, it led to war. We often know that why America went to war against Japan. We say, well, because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December 7, 1941, and seized Guam, which was American possession, in December 8, 1941. So we declared war. Um, you know, but one thing we often don't discuss is why did Japan attack America? Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? So we normally don't talk about that. I study history, and so I can do that now. And as I said, you can find patterns in history. You can find patterns in history. So today we see that America is disrupting China's oil. Uh, Things might be very different from 1941 when America disrupted the supply of Japan's oil, and it led to Japan uh, attacking America, right? Bombing Pearl Harbor and killing attacking American fleets. However, now that America is indirectly has actually disrupted China's supply of oil. The fact that these two powers have nuclear arms, I don't see them striking one another, directly, militarily, right? Just as the USA and the USSR just never went to war directly with each other because of they both possessed nuclear weapons, which meant if they struck one another, they could destroy the entire world, entire mankind. But back to Japan in 1941. So in 1937, Japan had been fighting a war against China. So Japan was very expansionist. It had these ambitions in Southeast Asia to create a greater um, prosperity, East Asia expansion. So it was expanding. It wanted to dominate East Asia, and of course, which is in the Pacific, right? Of course, America had shown its interest in the Pacific since the 19th century, right? America purchased Alaska from Russia under President Andrew Johnson. And of course, America went on to, uh, acquire the Philippines, Guam, and Hawaii under President McKinley after the Spanish-American War. So America had interests in the Pacific, wanted to dominate it to secure its access to markets in Asia, right? And other, its trading routes as well. So this was very vital. And, there were, later on, even in, so around the world in the Pacific, America went on to acquire the the Panama Canal, right? The Panama Canal, which helped America, control trade routes. The Panama Canal. So America under Theodore Teddy Roosevelt, America had encouraged Panama. It is said Teddy Roosevelt denied it, but the word was that America was the one that instigated Panama to secede from Colombia. So Panama was cut out from Colombia, so America could build the Panama Canal, right, and control it. So America had these interests in Southeast Asia, and but Japan was expansionist, wanted to dominate that area. Um, so America was not involved in the war. The war was already, the World War was already going on between Germany and the European powers. America wasn't going to get involved. Uh, and Japan, was at war with China since 1937. Now it turned out that America was the main supplier of Japan's oil, right? So Japan uh, imported virtually all of its oil, and of course, its oil was what fueled its military machine and its economy. And without that oil, Japan would be crippled. So what happened was America went on. America was trying to, sort of uh, induce Japan to stop its military campaign in against China. So what America did was America placed an oil embargo on Japan, and it seized Japan's assets in 1941, sometime in July 1941. Japan went on, it seized French Indochina. French Indochina is French Indochina is Vietnam. That's Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia today. We know that later on, after the Second World War, from the 1960s, America would go on, the tragic, disastrous debacle in the Vietnam War. But prior to that, in 1941, Japan had seized French Indochina. America placed an oil embargo on Japan, and so Japan basically lost about 90% of its oil imports, which crippled its economy, and it was threatening to grind its military machine to a halt, so it couldn't continue with its war against China, which is what America wanted. America, placed that embargo, indirectly, expecting that, that Japan would have the resources, the oil, to be able to continue its military campaign against China. Um, however, Japan refused to back down, and that's the challenge. Japan refused to back down, and it found itself in a do or die situation. So instead, Japan chose that um, it was going to seize oil-rich territories in Southeast Asia, including the Dutch East Indies. The Dutch East Indies is Indochina. That's Indonesia today. Dutch East Indies, right? That's modern day Indonesia. Brunei is close by. It was rich in oil, very rich in oil, and Japan also decided to seize the British protectorate Malaya, right? Malaya. So Japan decided to do that. That it was just going to seize, you know, oil-rich areas in Southeast Asia. However, before doing that, Japan decided that in order to, it knew that if it seized those territories, right, America would respond militarily because it would be threatening America's interests uh, in in the Pacific, which included Hawaii, the Philippines, and all the other territories that America had. So instead of waiting for America to hit it, so Japan had a preemptive strike so that it could cripple America's ability to attack Japan. At least before America could recover, Japan would have consolidated uh, its possession of the oil-rich territories in Indochina. That's sorry, in Indonesia. That's the Dutch East Indies, which is modern day Indonesia, right, and those other East Asia territories. So Japan went ahead and struck Pearl Harbor, bombed Pearl Harbor, and bombed, U.S. naval fleets, hoping to cripple its, at least slow down its America's military, campaign against it. So it was a preemptive strike. So we've seen what happened, right? We've seen um, where America placing oil embargoes on Japan caused, expecting Japan to back down and cease its military campaign in China. Instead, Japan refused to back down and chose to seek alternative sources and go to war with America. So the reason why I took us back there was because I've observed that the people are saying that, well, President Trump is acting randomly or whimsically, but these, interestingly, there's a pattern. These nations that are being struck, they're major partners of China, right? Venezuela is a major oil supplier to to China. Iran is a major oil supplier to China. These two nations are banned. They have sanctions imposed by the United States, right? I mean, those are nations that America has been calling rogue nations, and America long placed sanctions on Venezuela, right? America was hostile to the Maduro government prior to Maduro, Hugo Chavez, and America, of course, has long placed sanctions on Iran. Uh, America sanctioned Russia as well since its precipitation of the Ukraine war in 2022. But interestingly, these three nations that are sanctioned by the United States, they're major oil producers, and they all supply over 33% of China's oil. So now that America's military intervention against the two other nations, Venezuela and Iran, do not possess nuclear weapons like Russia. So America cannot simply go and assassinate their president because that's going to trigger a nuclear war, right? It's going to America is going to Russia probably has nuclear weapons directly targeting uh, the United States, right? So that's that craziness can happen. So America is not going to do that. Um, However, what's going to be China's response, well, as it feels threatened? Um, you know, in Japan's case, it was 90%, and Japan was already in a military campaign. It had been involved in wars for at least 4 years, right? And so Japan saw over 90% of its oil sources suddenly cut off, right? And it was in a military campaign. So Japan was in a do or die situation. It either had to stop its military campaign or it had to seek all the alternatives. And its only alternative at that time was an area that had America's footprint. America had its presence there. And so it seized those territories that were allies of the United States, right? These were nations that were allies of the United States. And so uh, America, Japan chose to strike against, to preempt a preemptive strike to sort of cripple America's ability to have a stronger response, right? Fortunately, America, developed. Well, I don't know. America developed the nuclear bomb, um, and we know the response, what happened, and how America was able to get Japan to surrender by dropping nuclear bombs. Unfortunately, in 1945, on civilian populations in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which killed over 210,000 Japanese. So, but things are different now. 30% to 50% of China's oil resources, oil supply have been disrupted, but China can seek alternatives, right? By the way, China does have stockpiles, right? It has about 1.2 billion barrels in stockpiles, so it can draw on that. So that's sort of when it has stockpiles, it's sort of a hedge against disruptions in the oil markets. So what China has been using as a major supplier, source of oil, have been the not the market driven uh, supply, market supply of oil, because these are sanctioned oil that they become black market, so they're like a back channel. That's because um, the Western powers have sanctioned Venezuela, Iran and Russia. But China is buying these, is buying its oil at discounted, very discounted rates, very cheap rates. So it's going to force China to look for alternatives that are probably going to be more expensive. And it can go and start purchasing oil directly from America, from Canada, but it's going to be at a costlier uh, rate than it was doing through the sanctioned sources, right, of Venezuela and Iran. Of course, it continues to get oil from Russia. Russia supplies about 20% of China's oil. By the way, China is also a major oil producer. China it augments its oil through its domestic production, produces about 4.9 to 5 million barrels per day. Um, and again, Russia, supplies it almost 100 million tons per year of oil, constituting about 20% of its supply. And China diversified its oil sources, right? Its oil supply by buying from approximately 50 nations. About 50 nations of supply China with oil. That includes African nations like Angola. It includes Brazil and so many other sources. So China is able to source its oil from alternatives. And there are many oil producing nations today. There might be an increase in prices. But again, China is also a major. It can also transfer the cost of production, right? It can transfer the cost to because China is a cheap producer of goods. If China transfers the cost of its production, the cost of its consumer goods that it provides the world, it's going to raise prices. It might give America an opportunity to boost its domestic manufacturing, right? Because America cannot produce consumer goods at the cheap prices that China is able to produce. So if China is raising the cost of its production, it might be an opportunity for America to produce and compete with Chinese products. So that's an alternative way to see what's going on. Uh, you know, that's barring uh, military retaliation from China. Knock on wood, right? So I thought I should give this brief history of how America had placed oil embargoes on Japan while Japan was in a military campaign against China. And since Japan lost 90% of its oil supply, Japan decided to seize rich oil territories in Dutch East Indies, in Malaya, and seized French Indochina, which is Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And in order to forestall, because it preempted America's military intervention, it Japan basically did a preemptive strike and struck Pearl Harbor first in order to sort of cripple uh, America's military response. And so that's why Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, December 1941, which induced America to uh, join the Second World War. Ultimately, America was victorious, of course, but it was a great loss of American lives. Now, how is this going to go? Hopefully, this doesn't go into the Third World War, because it will be a different, completely different scenario since nuclear weapons are involved. My name is Olu Osha. I'm going to stop this video here, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.